Commander Sarah Chen stood at the observation window of the Galactic Defense Academy's simulation chamber, her arms crossed as she watched her students file in. 20 human cadets, the first Earth had ever sent to this prestigious institution, were about to attempt what many considered impossible. The massive holographic chamber below hummed with energy, its crystalline walls ready to generate the most complex military simulation in known space. "They're just children," Grand Instructor Vaxtel clicked his mandibles dismissively. The towering insectoid's compound eyes reflected the blue glow from below. "They cannot possibly grasp the sophistication of the Rodaran gambit." Chen smiled, but kept her eyes on her students. "With respect, Grand Instructor, those children grew up playing games more complex than this simulation." She could feel the alien skepticism radiating like heat. "Have you ever heard of something called speedrunning?" The term's translation made Vaxtel's antennae twitch in confusion. "Elaborate." "Humans have a habit of taking complex systems and finding ways to break them completely. We call it exploiting mechanics, thinking outside the intended solution to achieve victory through unconventional means." Below, the cadets were settling into their neural interface pods. The Rodaran Gambit had stood undefeated for 3 centuries, a simulation based on an actual space battle where a vastly outnumbered fleet had held off an overwhelming force through supposedly perfect defensive positioning. Every major military academy used it as their final test. No one had ever broken it. Until today, Chen hoped. Cadet Marina Santos adjusted her neural interface, exchanging grins with her squadmates. They'd spent months analyzing this simulation, not through the traditional military theory approach, but by treating it like the vintage video games they'd grown up with. Every system had exploits. You just had to think like a human to find them. Beginning simulation initialization. The AI announced. Rodaran Gambit version 7.32. Standard parameters engage. Defensive fleet positioning locked. Attacking fleet resources allocated. The holographic chamber erupted into a perfect recreation of the historic battlefield. A massive gas giant loomed behind the defending fleet, its radiation belt providing both cover and a hazard. The attacking fleet, controlled by the cadets, materialized at the system's edge. "Interesting," Vaxtel noted, mandibles clicking rapidly as he observed their initial formation. "They're clustering their forces rather than establishing the standard approach vectors. Most inefficient." Chen's smile widened. "They're about to show you something new." Below, Marina's voice crackled over the command channel. "Remember, everyone, this isn't about winning the way it's supposed to be won. We're not here to prove we can outfight them. We're here to prove we can outthink them." The simulation's defending fleet was arranged in what centuries of military doctrine had declared a perfect defensive formation. It accounted for every traditional approach vector, every standard tactic. Its eye had been programmed with responses to every known strategy. But it had never faced humans who'd grown up breaking games for fun. Phase 1. Marina commanded. "Let's show them what Earth kids do for entertainment." The clustered attack fleet suddenly split into 3 groups. 2 began what appeared to be standard pincer movements, exactly what the defensive eye would expect. But the 3rd group did something unprecedented. They aimed their ships directly at the gas giant and fired their engines to maximum. "They'll be torn apart by the radiation," Vaxtel declared. "This is madness." "This," Chen corrected, "is humanity." The defending AI responded exactly as predicted to the pincer movements, shifting its forces to intercept. But it had no protocol for ships deliberately diving into a lethal radiation belt. As the 3rd group of human ships plunged into the maelstrom, their shields began to fail. Hull integrity warnings blared. But they calculated this precisely. They needed exactly 47 seconds. The radiation did exactly what they'd theorized. It excited the gas giant's already unstable upper atmosphere. The massive energy emissions from their failing ships acted as a catalyst. And then, just as their hulls began to breach, the human ships fired their remaining weapons. Not at the enemy fleet. at the gas giant itself. The resulting chain reaction was spectacular. A massive solar flare erupted from the gas giant's surface, creating an electromagnetic pulse, unlike anything the simulation had ever encountered. The defending fleet's perfect formation meant nothing when their sensors were suddenly blinded. "Impossible," Vaxtol whispered. "They sacrificed an entire battle group just to create a sensor blind spot." Phase 2. Marina's voice rang with triumph. Time to get weird. The pincer movement had been a feint. As soon as the EMP hit, the remaining human ships executed a maneuver that broke at least 7 laws of traditional space combat. They cut engines, fired maneuvering thrusters in seemingly random patterns, and let the gas giant's gravity do the work. The defending AI, programmed to respond to logical attack patterns, couldn't compute fast enough to track ships that were essentially falling through space in calculated chaos. By the time it adjusted, the human fleet had sliced through the defensive line at angles no sane commander would ever attempt. Time. The simulation froze. 17 minutes, 42 seconds, the AI announced. Defensive line breached. Victory conditions achieved. The observation room erupted in shocked murmurs from the gathered alien instructors. Vaxtol's mandibles worked soundlessly for several moments before he turned to Chen. How did they even conceive of such a strategy? Chen watched her students emerging from their pods below, exchanging high fives and victory whoops. Grand Instructor, humanity has spent its entire history finding ways to do the impossible. We don't see unbeatable scenarios. We see puzzles waiting to be solved. Your simulation was perfect by every logical standard. But humans, she grinned, we specialize in illogical solutions. Marina looked up at the observation window and gave a thumbs up. Chen returned it proudly. The Academy would never be the same after this. The impossible had been beaten not through superior firepower or perfect strategy, but through humanity's unique gift. The ability to look at the rules and ask, what if we didn't? I believe, Vaxtol said slowly, we have much to learn from Earth. Oh, Grand Instructor, Chen laughed, you have no idea. This was just the tutorial level. The Academy's central amphitheater had never been so crowded. Word of the human cadets' victory had spread like wildfire through the station, drawing observers from every major species. Grand Instructor Vaxtol had called an emergency session to analyze their unprecedented approach. Marina Santos sat with her fellow human cadets in the front row, trying not to smile as their simulation run played on the massive holographic display. Behind them, hundreds of alien students watched with a mixture of horror and fascination as they witnessed humanity's solution to the unsolvable. The fundamental question, Vaxtol addressed the assembly, is whether this victory represents a legitimate military strategy or merely an exploitation of simulation parameters. A Nexian representative rose, their crystalline form catching the light. These humans deliberately sacrificed warships to create a tactical advantage. Such waste of resources violates every principle of modern warfare. With respect, Marina stood, her voice clear and confident. Those principles are exactly why the simulation remained unbeaten for so long. Everyone tried to win by your rules. Our rules exist for a reason. Cadet Santos. The Nexian's tone carried the weight of centuries of military doctrine. War is not a game to be beaten through tricks. No, Marina agreed, it's not a game. But humanity learned long ago that survival sometimes means throwing away the rulebook. She gestured to the frozen hologram showing their ships diving into the radiation belt. You see waste. We see investment. Commander Chen stepped forward from her position at the side of the stage. Perhaps a demonstration would help explain the human perspective. Cadet Santos, would you walk us through your analysis process? Marina nodded and moved to the central platform. With a few gestures, she brought up the simulation's base parameters. The first thing we noticed was that the defensive AI's responses were too perfect. It covered every logical approach vector with optimal positioning. As it should, another instructor interjected. That is the purpose of tactical simulation. Exactly, Marina smiled. But nature isn't perfect. Chaos is the universe's default state. By creating a mathematically perfect defense, you actually made it vulnerable to imperfect attacks. She highlighted the gas giant's radiation field. This was supposed to be an obstacle, forcing attacking ships into predictable lanes. But what if we treated it as a tool instead? Earth's military history is full of examples where forces used impassable terrain to their advantage. The amphitheater hummed with murmurs as Marina manipulated the hologram, showing the cascade of events their suicide run had triggered. We didn't break your simulation. We just showed you its hidden assumptions. It assumed no commander would sacrifice ships needlessly. It assumed radiation barriers would be avoided. It assumed tactical doctrine would be followed. Those aren't assumptions, the Nexian objected. They are fundamental principles of warfare. They're fundamental principles of your warfare, Commander Chen corrected gently. Humanity evolved on a death world. Our entire history is defined by doing the impossible because we had no choice. Marina brought up historical images from Earth's military archives. The crossing of the Alps, the Doolittle raid, the Ghost Army. Time and again, humanity has achieved victory not through superior force or perfect planning, but by doing what the enemy considered impossible. The images shifted to show ancient human games, chess, Go, competitive video games. We've spent millennia training our minds to look for exploits, to find the gaps in seemingly perfect systems. Every human cadet in this room grew up breaking games apart to see how they worked. Vaxtul's antennae twitched thoughtfully. You treated our most sophisticated military simulation like a puzzle game. We treated it like reality, Marina corrected. In real combat, the side that thinks outside doctrine often prevails. Your simulation was too perfect, too logical. Real warfare is messy, chaotic, and often won by the side willing to take calculated risks. She gestured to her fellow cadets. Each of us contributed different gaming experiences to our solution. Speedrunners who specialize in breaking game mechanics. Strategy gamers who excel at resource exploitation. Even sports analytics played a role. The hologram shifted to show their victory moment. We didn't just break your simulation. We showed you its fundamental flaw. It assumed all species think alike about warfare. But humanity's strength has always been our ability to see patterns others miss, and our willingness to try the absurd. Commander Chen stepped forward again. The question isn't whether their victory was legitimate. The question is what it teaches us about the future of interspecies warfare. Humanity doesn't just bring new tactics to the galaxy. We bring new ways of thinking. The amphitheater had fallen silent. Even the most skeptical observers were beginning to understand the implications. The humans hadn't just beaten an unbeatable simulation. They demonstrated that centuries of established military doctrine might be fundamentally flawed. I propose, Vaxtul said finally, that we establish a new division within the Academy. One focused on studying alternative tactical approaches. His compound eyes fixed on Marina. And I believe we have found our first instructors. Marina exchanged grins with her fellow cadets. They'd come to learn from the galaxy's finest military minds, but instead, they were about to teach the galaxy how humans wage war. Not with perfect formations or unbreakable defenses, but with creativity, audacity, and the willingness to try the impossible. Just wait, she whispered to herself, until we show them what we can do with actual battles. Reset simulation parameters, Grand Instructor Vaxtul announced. Advanced Combat Scenario Omega-7. Marina Santos felt her pulse quicken as the holographic chamber transformed around them. This wasn't the Rodaran Gambit anymore. This was something new. Something created specifically to challenge human tactics. The alien instructors had spent weeks designing it, incorporating everything they'd learned from humanity's first victory. The chamber materialized into a complex stellar battlefield. 3 competing gravity wells, an asteroid field dense enough to shred shields, and a hostile fleet 4 times the size of their own. Let's see how your creative solutions fare against adaptive opponents, Vaxtol's mandibles clicked with what might have been satisfaction. The defending fleet wasn't running on standard AI anymore. It was being controlled by the Academy's top tactical instructors. Marina grinned at her squad through their neural interface feeds. They still don't get it, do they? Cadet Jean-Wei's laughter echoed through the command channel. They think they're testing us. Should we show them what humanity does when backed into a corner? All units, execute breaking point protocol, Marina commanded. Time to show them why Earth's games have difficulty settings. The human fleet split into seemingly random groups, each taking positions that violated every principle of fleet cohesion. The alien instructors responded cautiously, clearly expecting another trick, like the gas giant gambit. But humanity rarely used the same trick twice. Phase 1, Marina called. Let's make some noise. Their smallest ships, little more than armed shuttles, began weaving through the asteroid field at speeds that made the alien observers flinch. Not in formation, not following any discernible pattern, but in chaos that somehow looked orchestrated. Those pilots will die, one of the alien instructors commented. No one can maintain those trajectories. Commander Chen, watching from above, merely smiled. You're assuming they're trying to survive. The shuttle squadron wasn't attempting to attack or defend. They were herding asteroids. Small course corrections, precisely calculated impacts, creating a cascade of orbital changes that slowly, inexorably, began to shift the entire field. Observe, Chen pointed out to the bewildered alien staff. They're treating the battlefield itself as a weapon. The main human fleet held position, seemingly vulnerable, as the asteroid field began to warp and flex under the influence of the competing gravity wells. The alien instructors, still thinking in traditional tactical patterns, saw an opportunity to strike. That was exactly what Marina had counted on. Phase 2, she commanded. Show them why humans love tower defense games. The apparently vulnerable fleet suddenly revealed its true purpose. Each ship activated quantum tethers, experimental technology that the aliens had dismissed as too unstable for combat use. Energy beams linked ship to ship, creating a web of force that caught the incoming asteroids and began to spin them like a giant sling. Impossible, Vaxtol exclaimed. The power requirements alone would overload our systems in 3 minutes, Marina finished for him through the comm. Good thing we only need 2. The human fleet had turned itself into a massive gravitational accelerator, using the energy web to capture and redirect asteroids at relativistic speeds. The alien fleet found itself facing not enemy ships, but a carefully orchestrated meteor storm of their own making. This is madness, one of the alien instructors protested. They're expending more energy than a conventional weapon bombardment. But conventional weapons can be blocked, Commander Chen pointed out quietly. How do you stop several thousand asteroids, each with unique vectors, when your sensors are confused by gravitational interference? The alien fleet's perfect formation began to break apart as it tried to deal with threats coming from every direction. Each asteroid they destroyed split into smaller fragments, creating even more chaos. The battlefield had become a 3-dimensional puzzle where every solution created new problems. Phase 3, Marina called, her voice tight with concentration. Time to show them why humans invented parkour. The remaining human ships, their energy reserves nearly depleted from the quantum tether stunt, did something that made several alien observers physically recoil. They killed their engines completely. They're surrendering, someone asked. Chen shook her head. They're surfing. Using the last of their power, the human ships released electromagnetic pulses carefully timed to interact with the charged asteroid fragments. Then they went dark, letting physics do the work. Like ancient sailors catching trade winds, they began to ride the gravitational currents created by their earlier manipulation of the asteroid field. The alien instructors, trained to track powered ships and calculate weapon trajectories, found themselves unable to get targeting solutions on vessels that were essentially space debris themselves. The human fleet fell through their formation, weapons hot, but powered by momentum alone, striking from impossible angles before vanishing back into the chaos. Time. The simulation froze. Victory conditions achieved. Defending fleet combat efficiency reduced below 20% threshold. Marina pulled off her neural interface, brushing away sweat. Around her, her fellow cadets were doing the same, their faces showing the strain of such precise maneuvering, but also fierce pride. How did you even conceive of such a strategy? Vaxtel demanded as he entered the simulation chamber. Simple, Marina replied. We asked ourselves what would happen if we treated space combat more like a mosh pit than a chess game. The blank look on the alien instructor's face made her laugh. I think it's time we introduced the Academy to some human cultural concepts, starting with the idea that sometimes the best way to win isn't to be better at following the rules. It's to change the game entirely. Commander Chen watched from above as her cadets began enthusiastically explaining mosh pits, parkour, and other distinctly human activities to their bewildered alien instructors. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their ability to turn chaos itself into an art form. The Academy's war room had never seen such a heated debate. Holographic displays showed replay after replay of the human cadets' latest victory, while representatives from a dozen species argued about its implications. This cannot be allowed to continue. Admiral Kovacs of the Centaurian fleet slammed a tentacle against the conference table. They're not just breaking tactical doctrine, they're destroying centuries of military theory. Commander Chen leaned back in her chair, watching the chaos with barely concealed amusement. Her cadets sat along one wall, trying to maintain professional expressions as the galaxy's finest military minds grappled with their achievements. With respect, Admiral, Marina Santos spoke up. Maybe that's exactly what military theory needs. The room fell silent. Even now, after multiple demonstrations of human capability, the alien officers seemed shocked by such boldness from a cadet. Explain, Grand Instructor Vaxtel prompted, his compound eyes fixed on Marina. She stood, moving to the central hologram. Look at your military history. Every major innovation in tactics came from someone willing to break with tradition. But somewhere along the way, you stopped innovating. You found patterns that worked and codified them into unchangeable doctrine. Because they work. Kovacs protested. These patterns are based on mathematical perfection. And that's exactly why they're vulnerable. Marina highlighted their latest simulation victory. You've all forgotten something humans never could. Sometimes survival means embracing imperfection. Commander Chen nodded slightly, encouraging her student to continue. Marina pulled up Earth's military history alongside alien tactical databases. Every species here evolved on worlds that rewarded caution and precision. But Earth. She showed images of Earth's most dangerous predators, its natural disasters, its extremes of climate. We came from a world that tried to kill us every day. We couldn't afford to wait for perfect solutions. The hologram shifted to show their latest battle. When we turned your asteroid field into a weapon, you called it chaos. But we saw patterns in that chaos. The same patterns we learned to see in storms, in predator behavior, in the very forces that shaped us. Nexian analysts raised their crystalline form. But the energy expenditure, the resource waste, isn't waste if it achieves the objective, Marina countered. Humanity learned long ago that victory isn't about preserving your resources. It's about using them more effectively than your opponent. Sometimes that means spending everything to win now, rather than saving it to lose later. She brought up animations of Earth's weather patterns. Look at how a hurricane forms. It's chaos and destruction on a massive scale, but there's a perfect mathematical pattern at its heart. Humans learn to see beauty in destruction, to find order in chaos. We turned our greatest threats into our greatest teachers. The room was silent now, every alien observer transfixed as Marina manipulated the hologram to overlay weather patterns with their combat maneuvers. The similarities were striking. The way their ships had ridden gravitational currents like wind patterns, how they'd turned the asteroid field into a massive storm system. "You've all been trying to impose order on space combat," she continued. "But space itself is chaos. Solar winds, radiation fields, gravitational forces. Everything out there is trying to kill us, just like everything back on Earth. So we learned to work with that chaos instead of against it." Commander Chen finally stood. "What my cadets have demonstrated isn't just a new tactical approach. It's a fundamental shift in how we think about space combat. They haven't broken your doctrine. They've shown you its limits." "And what happens?" Admiral Kovacs asked quietly. "When these techniques are used in real combat, when actual lives are at stake?" "That's the best part," Marina smiled. "Everything we've shown you. Those were just the basic moves. Wait until you see what humanity can do when we're really trying." The implications hung in the air like a physical force. Humanity hadn't just created new tactics, they'd introduced an entirely new paradigm of warfare. One that treated the fundamental forces of the universe not as obstacles to be overcome, but as weapons to be harnessed. "I propose," Vaxtel said into the silence, "that we establish a new division within the Academy. Not just for studying human tactics, but for exploring this entire new approach to combat theory." "The Chaos Division," Chen suggested with a slight smile. "There's an old saying on Earth," Marina added. "The perfect is the enemy of the good." We've shown you that perfect formations and predictable tactics have their place, but they also have their limits. Maybe it's time to embrace a little controlled chaos." The alien officers exchanged looks. Their perfect orderly universe of combat doctrine had been upended by a species that treated battlefield physics like a force of nature to be surfed rather than an obstacle to be overcome. "Besides," Marina grinned, unable to resist, "wait until we show you what we can do with actual quantum mechanics." "Ever heard of something called sequence breaking?" The collective groan from her fellow cadets, and the looks of growing alarm on the alien officers' faces, suggested that the galaxy's military doctrine was about to get a lot more interesting. And a lot more human. 6 months after the humans had first shattered the unbeatable simulation, the Galactic Defense Academy looked very different. The once rigid corridors now buzzed with a new energy as species from across the galaxy came to study what was being called the human factor. Marina Santos stood at the window of the newly established Chaos Division, watching mixed teams of human and alien cadets run scenarios that would have been considered impossible half a year ago. Below, a Nexian crystalline being was teaching a group about fluid dynamics while a human instructor demonstrated how to apply surfing principles to zero-gravity combat. "Quite a change from when we first arrived," Commander Chen said, joining her at the window. "Though I'm not sure everyone's happy about it." Marina nodded toward a group of traditionalist instructors huddled in a corner, their expressions ranging from concerned to openly hostile. "They still think we're destroying military doctrine." "No," Chen smiled. "Now they're worried we're destroying their entire understanding of physics." The latest batch of simulation results flickered across the massive displays. Human-inspired tactics had led to a complete reassessment of what was possible in space combat. Traditional formations had given way to fluid, adaptive strategies that treated battlefield conditions as resources rather than obstacles. "Admiral Kovacs is coming today," Chen continued. "The Centaurian fleet wants to discuss implementing some of our approaches." Marina raised an eyebrow. "The same Admiral Kovacs who said we were corrupting the pure science of warfare." "The same. Apparently, their latest war games showed that traditional tactics are now effectively obsolete against any force using human-inspired strategies." A commotion near the simulation chambers drew their attention. A young Xylaxian cadet had just completed a run using a hybrid approach, combining their species' natural precision with human adaptability. The results were spectacular. That's what they really fear, Marina realized, watching the alien instructors' reactions. Not that we're breaking their rules, but that we're proving their rules were never as absolute as they thought. Chen nodded. Humanity didn't just bring new tactics to the galaxy. We brought doubt. And in military doctrine, Doubt can be more devastating than any weapon. The doors slid open as Admiral Kovacs entered, accompanied by representatives from 3 other major fleet commands. Their expressions were grim but determined as they approached the human section. "Commander Chen," Kovacs' tentacles rippled in formal greeting. "We've reviewed the latest data. The Joint Fleet Command has reached a conclusion." Marina held her breath. This could either be the beginning of a new era in galactic warfare or the end of human involvement in interstellar military operations. "Your species," Kovacs continued, "has demonstrated that our understanding of combat dynamics was fundamentally limited. We require human instructors for all major fleet operations." Chen's expression remained neutral, but Marina could see the slight smile at the corners of her mouth. "And the traditional doctrine will be preserved," Kovacs said, "but as a foundation, not a limitation. Your cadets have shown us that the true art of warfare lies not in perfect execution of established patterns, but in knowing when and how to break them." The Admiral's gaze swept across the Chaos Division's training floor. "Though I must admit, we're still struggling with some of your concepts. This thing you call speedrunning. Our analysts cannot comprehend how breaking a system can be considered a valid strategy." Marina laughed. "Admiral, breaking systems is how humanity learned to survive. Every limit we've encountered, every rule we've been told was absolute. They've all just been puzzles waiting to be solved. And that," Chen added, "is perhaps humanity's greatest contribution to galactic warfare. Not our tactics or our technology, but our fundamental belief that nothing is truly impossible, just improbable until proven otherwise." Kovacs' tentacles writhed in what might have been amusement. "Your species is terrifying, you know. You treat the laws of physics like suggestions and turn mathematical impossibilities into training exercises. We prefer to think of it as being creative," Marina grinned. "After all, if you're going to break the rules, you might as well do it with style." The Academy's central display lit up with a new simulation request. A joint human-alien team was preparing to attempt something that, according to every known law of physics and military doctrine, should be completely impossible. "Shall we show them how it's done?" Marina asked. Chen gestured toward the simulation chamber. "Lead the way, Cadet. Let's teach the galaxy another lesson about human innovation." As they walked toward the chamber, Marina could hear the alien instructors beginning to debate the implications of the upcoming demonstration. 6 months ago, they had seen humanity as an upstart species that didn't understand proper military doctrine. Now they were struggling to keep up with the pace of human-inspired innovation. "You know what the best part is?" Marina said quietly to Chen as they prepared for the simulation. "We haven't even shown them our really crazy ideas yet." Chen's laugh echoed through the chamber. The galaxy had wanted to teach humanity about warfare. Instead, humanity had taught the galaxy about imagination, innovation, and the pure joy of proving the impossible possible. And they were just getting started.